Stop your make-believe entrepreneur act, my sister scoffed at dinner. Your online venture isn't real business. Laughter filled the room. I nodded softly. I comprehended. Come Monday morning, I messaged my investment firm. My directive, pull $150 million from Sarah's tech startup. An emergency board meeting was called. The Cabernet caught the dining room light, swirling like liquid ambition, but before it touched my lips, Olivia's voice sliced through the hum of family chatter, sharp and precise. A sudden chill crept into the meticulously warmed air of my parents' dining room, palpable enough to make the hairs on my arms stand on end. "Stop playing pretend entrepreneur," she declared, her eyes, usually so warm and familiar, now pinned me with that specific condescending gleam I'd known since childhood. "Your little online thing isn't real business." I felt the silence spread, heavy and immediate. My dad's fork, suspended in midair, clinked against his porcelain plate as he lowered it. Mom shifted, the rustle of her dress a testament to her discomfort. Across the table, Michael, Olivia's husband, let out a snort into his napkin, a sound that tightened a cold knot in my gut, making my stomach clench with an unpleasant anticipation. "I mean, come on," Olivia continued, warming to her subject, her voice gaining an irritating timbre of self-righteousness. "You sit at home in pajamas clicking on a computer. Real business people wear suits. They have offices. They have employees you can actually see." Michael, ever the sycophant, nodded enthusiastically, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Olivia just closed a deal with Meridian Properties," he chimed in, his voice booming a little too loudly. $43 million. That's real business. Here's the thing, I knew the drill. My brother-in-law owned a commercial real estate firm, drove a Tesla, and had a wardrobe that screamed expensive suit. Olivia, my older sister, ran a tech startup called Next Gen Solutions, and yeah, she was making waves. They lived in a glass and steel house in the suburbs, complete with a pool and a 3-car garage. Meanwhile, I occupied a modest apartment downtown, my world contained within the glow of my laptop screen. "How much did you make this year?" Olivia asked, her tone dripping with a saccharine concern that tasted like poison. "From your online thing?" The entire table held its breath. Mom looked like she wanted to physically disappear into the tablecloth. Dad cleared his throat, a low rumble, but said nothing. My younger cousin, Chloe, let out a nervous, almost imperceptible giggle. "I do all right," I managed to say, my voice a quiet ripple against the sudden tension. "All right," Olivia repeated, the word twisted into an accusation, as if I'd admitted to having a contagious disease. "You're 32 years old. Mom told me you still have student loans." She paused for dramatic effect. "Meanwhile, I'm expanding to 3 new markets next quarter. We just hired 15 new developers." Mom started to interject, "Olivia, darling," but my sister waved her off with a dismissive hand. "No, Mom. Someone needs to say it. She needs to hear this. You're not helping her by pretending her little side hustle is equivalent to what Michael and I do. It's not the same thing." Michael leaned back in his chair, puffing out his chest. "What's your revenue? Do you even have revenue?" My gaze dropped to my plate. The salmon Mom had prepared so lovingly, flaked and perfectly seasoned, now seemed utterly unappetizing, a gray, lifeless thing. "See," Olivia crowed triumphantly. "She can't even answer." "That's because there's nothing to answer. Playing around on the internet isn't building a business. It's a hobby that might make you a few $100 a month if you're lucky." The sheer weight of their collective judgment pressed down on me. The entire table, Aunt Susan, Uncle Robert, my 3 cousins, they were all staring, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to crumble. I slowly, meticulously folded my napkin, placing it with practiced precision beside my plate. "Understood." Olivia blinked. "What?" "I understand what you're saying," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of any discernible emotion. "You're right. I should probably think about getting a real job." The satisfaction that bloomed on her face was almost nauseating. It made my stomach churn with a visceral disgust. "Finally, some sense," she purred. "Michael actually mentioned his company might need an administrative assistant. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be steady income, real income." That's very generous, I said, rising from my seat with a smooth, unhurried motion. Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was delicious. I leaned down, kissing her cheek, which felt surprisingly cool against my lips. I should go. Mom's face was a mask of distress. Honey, you don't have to leave. I offered a tight, almost imperceptible smile. I have work tomorrow. Early morning. As I walked towards the door, retrieving my coat from the rack, Olivia's voice followed me, tinged with a smug victory. Think about what I said. It's never too late to join the real world. The drive home was conducted in a profound, almost eerie silence. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't water. I felt absolutely nothing, which, in its own way, was somehow worse than feeling angry or deeply hurt. That numbness settled over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket, sealing off any emotional response. My apartment was quiet when I returned, the stillness amplified by the city's distant hum. I made a cup of Earl Grey, the familiar aroma doing little to stir me, and sat at my desk, staring at the 3 monitors that dominated my workspace, the very little online thing Olivia had mocked so thoroughly. Here's where it gets interesting, because what Olivia didn't know, what I'd meticulously kept from my entire family, was that my little online thing was actually Crimson Capital, a venture capital firm I'd built from scratch over the past 8 years. I'd started small, sure, investing my own money from a software patent I'd sold when I was 24. That patent alone had netted me a cool $12 million, and I'd used it as the seed to build something truly real, something very, very substantial. Crimson Capital now managed assets worth $890 million. We held silent stakes in 43 companies across tech, healthcare, and renewable energy sectors. I kept my name off everything, a phantom in the background. My partners were the front-facing executives, handling the public relations and the glad-handing, while I operated in the shadows, analyzing deals, crunching numbers, and making the actual investment decisions. And this is where the plot thickens. One of those 43 companies was NextGen Solutions, Olivia's tech startup. She had absolutely no idea. When NextGen had been seeking Series B funding 2 years ago, my team had presented the opportunity. The app development platform showed promise. The numbers looked solid. I'd personally approved a $150 million investment that ultimately gave Crimson Capital a 38% stake in her company. Olivia, basking in the glow of her supposed success, believed her funding had come from a consortium of sophisticated, faceless investors she'd never met. She'd signed the papers, toasted with champagne, and, in her hubris, never bothered to dig into the actual ownership structure. Michael had been so proud, bragging to everyone about how his wife had attracted major Boston tech money. That major Boston tech money was now sitting in her apartment, sipping tea and staring at investment portfolios. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face with a cold blue light, and pulled up the NextGen files. The company was performing adequately enough. Revenue was up. User acquisition was steady. They were burning through cash at a reasonable rate for a company of their size. The deal to expand into 3 new markets that Olivia had so casually mentioned at dinner? Solid planning, objectively speaking. But Crimson Capital owned 38% of it. And according to the shareholder agreement, a document Olivia had likely skimmed, any investor with more than 35% ownership had the right to call for a full board review and restructuring if they felt leadership wasn't serving the company's best interests. I'd never exercised that right. I'd let Olivia run her company, trusting her judgment, staying out of her way. My phone buzzed, vibrating softly on the desk. A text from Mom. I'm sorry about tonight. Olivia shouldn't have said those things. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email and began to type, fingers flying across the keyboard, a strange calm settling over me. The recipient, Daniel Hayes, Managing Partner, Crimson Capital. From Sarah Jenkins, Founder, Crimson Capital. Subject, NextGen Solutions. Immediate action required. Time sent, Sunday, 11:47 p.m. Daniel. Pull our entire position from NextGen Solutions. Effective immediately. Exercise our contractual right to call an emergency board meeting for Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. I'll be attending in person. Prepare documentation for full investment withdrawal. We're liquidating our stake. I hit send, closed my laptop, the click a satisfying punctuation mark, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. Monday was a whirlwind of preparation. Daniel called at 7 o'clock in the morning, his voice tight with barely contained stress. Are you absolutely certain about this? Once we file the notice, there's no walking it back quietly. My voice was steady, unwavering. I'm certain. He let out a long, weary sigh. The board members are scrambling. Olivia called me 6 times yesterday evening. She's panicking. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Good. Another sigh. I've scheduled the meeting for tomorrow morning. Everyone confirmed attendance. They know this is serious. I spent the entire day reviewing every single document related to the next-gen investment. The shareholder agreement that Olivia had signed without a thorough read. The one where Crimson Capital was listed clearly, but nested within a complex LLC structure that purposefully obscured my personal involvement. It was legal. It was intentional. And it had worked exactly as designed, keeping my identity separate from my investments until this moment. Tuesday morning dawned under gray skies, a cold wind rattling the windows of my apartment. I dressed carefully, almost ritualistically. A navy suit, impeccably tailored, a crisp white blouse, and heels that added 3 inches to my height, making me feel grounded, powerful. My hair was swept up into a professional twist, severe and controlled. Diamond studs, small but brilliant, were the only jewelry I wore. I looked like money because, frankly, I was money. The emergency board meeting was set for NextGen's downtown offices, the fancy glass and steel space Olivia had leased in a high-rise with a commanding view of the river. I arrived at 8:45 a.m., the polished lobby a symphony of hushed efficiency. The elevator whisked me silently to the 16th floor. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly coiffed hair, looked startled when I walked in. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice a little too high. "I'm here for the board meeting. Conference room B." A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "I'm sorry, but that meeting is—" "I'm aware it's closed," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "I'm Sarah Jenkins from Crimson Capital. I called the meeting." Her eyes widened perceptibly. "One moment, please." She picked up her phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, her gaze darting to me repeatedly. 30 seconds later, a man in his 50s emerged from the hallway. Mark Davis, NextGen's CFO. I'd reviewed his employment contract personally when he was hired, a good, solid hire. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, extending his hand, his expression a mixture of surprise and carefully veiled concern. "This is unexpected. We weren't aware you'd be attending personally." "I don't usually attend in person," I replied, my grip firm as I shook his hand. "But today's circumstances warrant it." He led me down the hallway towards the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see people already assembled, faces I recognized from their files, several board members, 2 venture partners from other firms, and Olivia, sitting at the head of the table, looking confident, composed, and utterly, blissfully unprepared. I pushed open the door and walked in. Every head at the table swiveled. Olivia's eyes, bright and expectant, met mine. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by a dawning incredulity. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a little too loud. "I'm here for the board meeting," I stated simply, pulling out a chair directly across from her. "This is a board meeting for NextGen Solutions." "You are not." She stopped mid-sentence, a sudden tremor in her voice. Something in my expression, perhaps the cold, unyielding determination, must have registered. "What's going on?" she whispered, her gaze now frantically searching the room for answers. Mark Davis cleared his throat, his voice formal. "Ms. Jenkins is the founding partner of Crimson Capital." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Crimson Capital holds the largest minority stake in NextGen Solutions." The color drained from Olivia's face, leaving her pale, almost translucent. It was a stark visual representation of her world crashing down. "What?" "Your Series B funding," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. The $150 million that allowed you to expand operations, hire your development team, and lease this beautiful office space? That money came from my firm. Olivia looked like she'd been physically slapped, the shock etched onto her features. That's not possible. The investment came from a consortium. I never saw your name on any documents. Her voice was laced with a desperate denial. You didn't look carefully enough, I countered, my tone flat, emotionless. Crimson Capital is listed in your shareholder agreement. We structured the investment through an LLC to maintain privacy, but the documentation was clear. Page 7, Section 3, Subsection V. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a copy, sliding it across the polished table. You might want to review it. Her hands trembled as she picked up the document. I watched her eyes scan the page, frantic, searching for proof that I was lying, for an escape hatch from this unfolding nightmare. Instead, she found my company's name, nested precisely within the legal structure she'd signed without thorough review, her due diligence clearly lacking. This highlights a crucial legal and business principle, the importance of understanding contractual obligations and ownership structures. Many entrepreneurs, especially in high-growth phases, can overlook the fine print, but neglecting due diligence can have catastrophic consequences, as power imbalances inherent in these agreements can be exploited later. You've been my investor for 2 years, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You never said anything. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of raw pain now replacing the confusion. You never asked what I actually did for a living, I shot back, the words sharp, cutting. You were too busy explaining to everyone how I didn't have a real business. Mark Davis, sensing the escalating personal conflict, cleared his throat again, trying to steer the conversation back to business. Ms. Jenkins has exercised her right under the shareholder agreement to call for this emergency meeting. She's indicated an intention to liquidate Crimson Capital's full position. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, their faces now a mixture of concern and growing alarm. Emily Chin, a sharp-faced woman from Silverton Partners, spoke up, her voice crisp. A full liquidation, that's a significant move. Can you elaborate on your reasoning? I kept my eyes fixed on Olivia, unwavering. I've lost confidence in current leadership. I don't believe the CEO has the judgment necessary to guide this company through its next phase of growth. That's absurd, Olivia blurted out, finally finding her voice, a flash of her old arrogance returning. You're doing this because I hurt your feelings at a family dinner. This is completely unprofessional. What's unprofessional is dismissing someone's career without knowing anything about it, I countered, my voice rising slightly. What's unprofessional is mocking your own sister at a family gathering because you assumed she was unsuccessful. But this decision has nothing to do with my feelings, Olivia. This is purely business. You can't just pull $150 million out of a company because I said something you didn't like, she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. Actually, I can. And I am. I opened my laptop, the screen reflecting my unyielding expression, and pulled up the financial projections. NextGen has burned through $89 million of the original investment. You have $61 million remaining in operational funds. The company's valuation has grown to approximately $475 million based on your revenue growth and market position. Crimson Capital's 38% stake is currently valued at approximately $180 million. I'll be divesting that stake through a structured buyout that won't crater the company, but it will leave you scrambling for replacement funding. Emily Chin leaned forward, her expression now one of intense interest. Who's going to purchase that stake? Moving $180 million isn't something you do overnight. I have 3 interested buyers already lined up, I stated calmly, the words like cold steel. They'll want board seats. They'll want voting rights. And they'll want significant say in operational decisions. I looked directly at Olivia, letting the full weight of my words land. Your autonomy as CEO is about to become much more limited. Mark Davis was typing rapidly on his tablet, his face pale. If we lose Crimson's capital and bring in new investors with board seats, we'll need to restructure completely. The expansion plans would have to be delayed, possibly indefinitely. That's what happens when you build a company on someone else's money, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You play by their rules. Olivia's jaw clenched, a muscle working furiously in her cheek. You're sabotaging my company to prove a point. I'm withdrawing my investment because I don't trust your leadership. There's a difference. I closed my laptop with a definitive snap. You spent yesterday evening explaining to our entire family that I don't understand real business. You said I'm playing pretend. You offered to get me a job as an administrative assistant. The room was dead silent, every single person hanging on my words. Here's what you don't understand, Olivia. While you were building one company with money you raised from investors, I was building a portfolio of 43 companies. I have stakes in everything from AI healthcare platforms to renewable energy startups. Last year, Crimson Capital's returns were 42%. My personal net worth is approximately $340 million. Olivia looked like she might be physically sick. So, when you talk about real business, I continued, my voice now carrying a quiet, controlled power, remember that I've been operating at a level you haven't even imagined yet. You got lucky with one successful app platform. Congratulations. I've been making calculated investment decisions that shape entire market sectors. Emily Chin was staring at me with newfound respect, her earlier neutrality replaced by awe. You're that Sarah Jenkins from the Crimson Capital that backed Nova Medical Systems and Helix Energy Solutions and Cascade Analytics, among others. Those are billion-dollar companies. They are now, I clarified. They weren't when I invested. Olivia's hands were flat on the table, her knuckles white, as if she were trying to ground herself, to keep from floating away in the face of this overwhelming reality. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let everyone think you were struggling? Because I don't need my family's validation. I don't need to prove anything to Dad or Mom or Aunt Susan or anyone else. I know what I've built. I know what I'm capable of. I stood up, my posture straight, my gaze unwavering. But you decided to humiliate me publicly, and I won't tolerate that. Not from anyone. Sarah, please. Olivia's voice cracked, raw with a desperate plea. Don't do this. We can talk about this privately. We're past that. I indicated Daniel Hayes. He'll handle the transition details. You'll have 90 days to secure replacement funding before the buyout is finalized. I suggest you start making calls. I picked up my briefcase and turned towards the door. You're destroying everything I worked for. Olivia called after me, her voice now a desperate wail. I turned back, one last glance. No, I'm removing my support from someone who doesn't respect me. You'll survive this. Your company might even thrive under new leadership. But you'll do it without my help, and you'll remember what it cost you. I left the conference room, walking past the stunned receptionist, her mouth slightly agape. The elevator doors closed, sealing off next-gen solutions, Olivia's shocked, heartbroken face, and the board members scrambling to understand what had just happened. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the lobby. Mom, Dad, Aunt Susan. I ignored all of them. The drive back to my apartment took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. I kept the radio off, preferring the silence to process the raw, complicated emotions churning within me. Part of me, the wounded part, felt utterly vindicated. The look on Olivia's face when she realized who I actually was, that moment of pure, unadulterated shock had been worth 8 years of family dinners where I'd been treated like the unsuccessful younger sister. But another part of me felt hollow, empty, as if I'd just burned down a bridge I might need someday. I parked in my building's garage and took the elevator to the 14th floor. My apartment felt different somehow when I walked in. The same furniture, the same expansive view of the city, the same desk with 3 monitors displaying market data. But something subtle had shifted. My laptop pinged with an incoming email. Daniel Hayes again. Subject: Next-gen situation. Media inquiries. Sarah, we're already getting calls from Tech Business Weekly and the Silicon Report asking about the next-gen divestment. I've stonewalled them for now, but this is going to be a story. How do you want me to handle it? Also, Emily Chin from Silverton Partners called. She wants to discuss potentially taking over part of our stake. She seemed very interested in working with you directly on future deals. Let me know your strategy here. I stared at the email. The business world moved fast, impossibly fast. What had unfolded in that conference room just an hour ago was already rippling outward, creating opportunities and problems in equal measure. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Not mom or dad this time. The caller ID showed a number I recognized, Kevin Miller, CEO of Cascade Analytics, one of my most successful portfolio companies. Kevin, I answered. What can I do for you? Sarah? I heard through the grapevine about what happened at NextGen this morning. Is everything all right? Word truly traveled impossibly fast in the investment community. Everything's fine. Just a routine restructuring. Pulling $150 million is routine? His voice was skeptical, but not unkind. Look, I don't mean to pry into your business, but Cascade has benefited enormously from your guidance over the past 4 years. If there's instability at Crimson Capital, I need to know. There's no instability. This was a singular situation involving personal circumstances that won't be repeated. Personal circumstances. He let those words hang in the air, weighted with unspoken meaning. I see. Well, I trust your judgment. You've never steered me wrong. But Sarah, he paused, his tone shifting, becoming more intimate, and I'm saying this as someone who considers you a friend, not just an investor. Be careful. Mixing personal and professional rarely ends well. I appreciate the concern. Good luck. And if you need to talk, I'm here. After he hung up, I sat at my desk and opened the NextGen files again. Olivia's company was solid. The technology was sound. The team was competent. The market opportunity was real. Everything about it screamed good investment. Everything except for one factor. The CEO had publicly humiliated me. Was that enough reason to torpedo a $180 million stake? My email pinged again, this time from someone completely unexpected. Mark Davis, NextGen's CFO. Subject: Confidential discussion request. Ms. Jenkins. I hope this message finds you well. After this morning's board meeting, I feel compelled to reach out directly. I've worked with Olivia for 18 months now. She's brilliant, driven, and has built something genuinely innovative. She's also young, sometimes arrogant, and occasionally lacks the emotional intelligence that separates good CEOs from great ones. What happened between you two is none of my business, but I have a company full of employees who depend on NextGen's success for their livelihoods. Families counting on this company to survive. I'm asking you to reconsider your decision. Not for Olivia's sake, but for theirs. If there's any possibility of finding a resolution that doesn't involve liquidating Crimson's position, I would be deeply grateful for the opportunity to discuss it respectfully. Mark Davis. I read the email 3 times, the words sinking in with a cold clarity. Mark was right. NextGen had a substantial workforce, depending on the company's stability. Engineers who'd probably moved across the country for this job, recent graduates in their first positions, parents and spouses, people trying to build careers. Over 140 individuals whose livelihoods were tied directly to the company's future. None of them had anything to do with what Olivia had said at a family dinner. My actions would affect all of them. The realization settled over me like a sudden, drenching rain. I'd been so focused on Olivia, on my anger and my hurt, on my justifiable outrage, that I hadn't fully considered the broader impact. Pulling my investment wouldn't just damage my sister, it would send shockwaves through an entire organization, impacting innocent lives. This illustrates the ripple effect of personal conflicts in professional settings, a key concept in organizational behavior. A decision, even if justified by personal offense, can have far-reaching, unintended consequences for stakeholders who are completely external to the original dispute. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. He answered on the first ring, his voice guarded. Tell me honestly, I said without preamble. Am I making a mistake? Do you want my professional opinion or my personal one? Both. Professionally, pulling out of a performing investment because of personal conflict is questionable at best. It sets a precedent that Crimson Capital makes decisions based on emotion rather than data. That's not good for our reputation. And personally, he sighed, personally, I understand why you're angry. What your sister said was cruel and dismissive. You had every right to be hurt. But Sarah, you've built something extraordinary over the past 8 years. Don't let one bad family dinner destroy what you've created. Not just Crimson Capital, but your relationship with your sister. She destroyed that relationship when she decided to humiliate me. Did she? Or did she just make a mistake born of ignorance? His voice was gentle, a subtle prod. I'm not defending what she said, but from what you told me, she genuinely didn't know what you do. She thought she was giving advice to someone who was struggling. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. But it makes it human. People say stupid things. They make assumptions. They hurt each other without meaning to. He paused. The question is, what kind of person do you want to be? Someone who wields power like a weapon when you're hurt, or someone who uses power responsibly, even when it's hard? I closed my eyes, a tremor running through me. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side. That's why I'm telling you this. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the afternoon wrestling with the decision. I pulled up financial models, reviewed investment theses, analyzed market conditions. Everything I looked at confirmed that NextGen was a solid company with strong fundamentals. Everything, that is, except my wounded pride. The fallout was immediate and brutal. By Wednesday morning, word had spread through the family about what had happened. Mom called 17 times. I finally answered on the 18th. Sarah, what have you done? She asked, her voice strained, bordering on a cry. I withdrew my investment from a company. That's all. That's all. Olivia is devastated. She's been crying for hours. Michael called your father saying you sabotaged them out of spite. I made a business decision based on my assessment of leadership quality. Your sister's. How could you hurt her like this? The question made something sharp twist in my chest, a fresh pang of the old wound. How could she hurt me like she did, in front of the whole family? She didn't know what you actually did for work, Mom insisted, clinging to her narrative. She thought she was superior to me. She thought I was pathetic. And instead of asking questions or showing interest in my life, she decided to publicly humiliate me. My voice stayed level, though my heart was pounding a furious rhythm. I don't owe her my financial support, Mom. Especially not after how she treated me. But $150 million, Sarah, you're putting her entire company at risk. She'll find other investors. She has a solid product. She'll land on her feet. Will she? Mom's voice broke, tears now evident. Your father is worried she might lose everything. Then maybe she'll learn something about making assumptions. I hung up before Mom could respond. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. Wednesday brought another wave of consequences. Olivia, in her desperation, went to the press. An article appeared in TechPulse about internal conflict at NextGen Solutions. She didn't name me specifically, but she talked about personal conflicts with investors that were threatening the company's stability. The business community started talking. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, was full of messages from other portfolio companies, their CEOs wondering if I was unstable, if I made investment decisions based on personal grudges, if their funding was secure. I spent Tuesday afternoon on damage control calls. Kevin from Cascade Analytics wasn't the only CEO who had heard rumors. James Lee from Helix Energy Solutions wanted reassurance. Nova Medical Systems requested an emergency call with their board. Even small portfolio companies, representing less than 1% of Crimson's assets, were suddenly nervous. I need you to understand something, I told James Lee, CEO of Helix Energy, my voice measured and calm despite the rising pressure. What happened with NextGen is an isolated incident involving unique personal circumstances. Your company's funding is completely secure. Crimson Capital's investment in Helix has always been based on your technology, your team, and your market potential. Nothing about that has changed. But you pulled $150 million from a successful company over what people are saying was a family argument, James said carefully, his voice betraying his unease. That makes investors nervous, Sarah. It makes us wonder if our funding depends on keeping you personally happy rather than hitting our business milestones. The words stung because they were fair and uncomfortable truth. My reputation, my social capital, was rapidly eroding. I understand your concern, and I'm going to be transparent with you in a way I haven't been with most people. My sister is NextGen CEO. She didn't know I was her primary investor. The situation that unfolded was complicated by family dynamics that have nothing to do with how I evaluate business performance. There was a long silence on the line. Your sister runs NextGen? Yes. And she didn't know you were backing her company. I keep my involvement in portfolio companies confidential. Always have. It allows me to make objective decisions without personal relationships clouding my judgment. Until those personal relationships blow up in your face, James said, not unkindly. I get it now. That's a complicated situation, but it doesn't change the fact that you made an emotional decision that's affecting your reputation. Our investors are already asking questions about Crimson's stability. What do you need from me to reassure them? Fix the situation with your sister. Show the community that you can handle personal conflict without nuking business relationships, because right now the narrative is that you're vindictive and unpredictable. That's not the Sarah Jenkins I've known for 3 years. After that call ended, I sat staring at my monitors for a long time. The market data scrolled past, meaningless numbers and charts that usually brought me clarity. But clarity felt impossible to find. My apartment doorbell rang that evening around 7. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I checked the video intercom, I saw Michael standing in the hallway. Great, I thought, a surge of weary resignation. This should be fun. I buzzed him up and opened the door before he could even knock. If you're here to yell at me, get it over with. He stepped inside, looking uncomfortable in my space. Michael rarely visited my apartment. I suspected he'd always found it too modest, too unglamorous for his taste. I'm not here to yell, he said quietly, his voice surprisingly subdued. Olivia doesn't know I'm here. Can we talk? I gestured to the living room couch. He sat down, looking around at my simple furniture, my minimal decorations. His eyes landed on the panoramic view of the city through the windows, now sparkling with lights against the deepening twilight. Nice view, he said, almost reluctantly. It's adequate. Sarah, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees, his usual bravado replaced by an unfamiliar vulnerability. What Olivia said at that dinner was completely out of line. I should have stopped her. I should have defended you. Instead, I laughed along with everyone else, and I'm ashamed of that. I hadn't expected this, not from him. Okay. Olivia told me everything after the board meeting yesterday, about Crimson Capital, about your net worth, about how long you've been operating at this level while we all treated you like you were barely scraping by. He shook his head, a genuine look of bewilderment on his face. I've spent 2 years bragging about my wife's success, while you quietly built something 10 times bigger than anything I'll ever accomplish. This isn't a competition, Michael. Isn't it, though? That's what families do. We compare. We measure success against each other. And somewhere along the way, we decided you were at the bottom of that hierarchy. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in them. We were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Why are you telling me this? Because Olivia is falling apart. She's barely sleeping. She's convinced she's going to lose the company. But more than that, she's convinced she's lost you, her sister. And watching her spiral is making me realize how badly we all failed you. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. She dismissed my entire career in front of our family. She made me feel worthless. I know. And she's going to have to live with that. But Sarah, his voice cracked slightly, a hint of desperation in it, she's also your sister. The same person who used to walk you to school when you were scared. Who taught you how to drive? Who stayed up all night helping you study for your college entrance exams? I remember all of that. Then remember it means something. You two have history that goes beyond one terrible dinner. And I'm asking you, as someone who loves her, to consider whether destroying her company is really going to make you feel better in the long run. I turned to face him. Why do you care? If NextGen fails, it hurts you too. Your wife's success reflects on you. Isn't that what you wanted? To be married to a successful CEO? He flinched, the accusation hitting its mark. That's fair. And yes, partly I'm here because NextGen failing would be catastrophic for our family financially. But I'm also here because I've watched Olivia realize what she lost. Not the funding, though that's terrifying enough, but her relationship with you. She's been crying at random moments, staring at old photos from when you were kids, talking about how she took you for granted. Good. Maybe she should feel guilty. She does. Trust me, she does. But guilt doesn't solve anything. It just eats people alive from the inside. Michael stood up, his face etched with a plea. I'm not asking you to pretend nothing happened. I'm asking you to consider whether there's a version of this situation where you don't lose your sister permanently. After he left, I made more tea and sat at my desk, Michael's words echoing in my mind. Old photos. Olivia crying. Our shared history. I thought about the time Olivia had stayed up all night helping me study for my college entrance exams, patiently explaining differential equations until my brain ached. The way she'd threatened to fight anyone who bullied me in middle school, a fierce protective streak hidden beneath her often prickly exterior. How she'd brought me soup every day for a week when I had pneumonia at 23, despite her own busy schedule. Before the comparison started, before the subtle competition, before we drifted into these roles of successful sister and struggling sister that had never been accurate to begin with. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please talk to your father. He's worried about both of you. I called Dad instead of texting back. He answered immediately. Sarah, he said, relief evident in his voice, thick and emotional. Thank God. Your mother has been beside herself. I know. I'm sorry I haven't been responsive. What's going on? Olivia told us some things, but I want to hear your side of it. So, I told him everything. About Crimson Capital, about building my firm in silence, about investing in Olivia's company without her knowledge, about the dinner and what she'd said, and how small she'd made me feel. Dad listened without interrupting, his silence heavy and attentive. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I failed you, he said finally, his voice thick with regret. What? No, Dad. I did. Your mother and I both did. We were so focused on Olivia's visible success that we never bothered to ask what you were actually doing. We assumed you were struggling because you weren't flashy about your accomplishments. We should have known better. We should have known you. My throat tightened, a lump forming there. I didn't make it easy. I kept everything quiet on purpose. Because we made you feel like you had to, Dad said, his voice laced with self-reproach. Because we created an environment where Olivia's way of doing things loud, public, progressive, was the only way we recognized success. You found a different path. And instead of celebrating that, we ignored it. I'm not blameless here. What I did to Olivia's company, what you did was react to being hurt. That's human. Maybe not the wisest business decision, but human. He sighed, a weary sound. Olivia is devastated, honey. Not just about the company, though that's part of it. She's devastated that she hurt you so badly. She called me this morning and spent an hour crying about how she destroyed your relationship. She should have thought about that before she decided to humiliate me. You're absolutely right. She should have. But people make mistakes. Stupid, hurtful mistakes. The question is whether you can find a way to forgive her, even if you can't forget what happened. After we hung up, I sat in the darkening apartment, thinking about forgiveness and revenge and what I actually wanted from this situation. Did I want Olivia to suffer? Did I want her to lose everything she'd built? Or did I just want her to see me? Really see me, not as the little sister or the struggling entrepreneur, but as an equal, as someone worthy of respect. My laptop was still open to NextGen's financial files. I pulled up the employee roster and started reading through names and positions. Engineers who'd probably moved across the country for this job, recent graduates in their first positions, parents and spouses, people trying to build careers. Over 140 individuals whose livelihoods depended on the company's stability. Daniel called Wednesday morning. We need to have a conversation. Go ahead. The other partners are concerned. What happened with NextGen is raising questions about your judgment. My judgment is fine. You pulled $150 million from a performing company because your sister insulted you at dinner. That's not fine, Sarah. That's petty. The word hit harder than I expected, a blunt force trauma to my ego. She didn't just insult me. She tried to make me feel worthless in front of my entire family. And now you've proven you have the power to destroy her career. Point made. But the cost might be your reputation. I stared at my monitors, the numbers and charts and data points that had been my whole world for 8 years. What do you want me to do? Talk to her. Work something out. Show the business community that you're not someone who lets personal feelings drive investment decisions. Even though that's exactly what I did. Even though that's exactly what you did, Daniel confirmed, his voice holding no judgment, only a pragmatic assessment. Fix this, Sarah, or Crimson Capital's reputation is going to suffer. He was right. I hated that he was right, but he was. I drove to Olivia's house Friday evening. The glass and steel structure looked less impressive in the fading light, more vulnerable somehow. Michael answered the door. His face was hostile, etched with weariness. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here. I need to talk to Olivia. She doesn't want to see you. Michael, please. Just let me talk to her. He stared at me for a long moment, then stepped aside, a silent, grudging acquiescence. Living room. Don't make this worse. Olivia was sitting on the couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy, careless ponytail. She looked utterly exhausted, defeated. Hi, I said quietly. Come to finish the job? Her voice was raw, scraped thin. No, I came to talk. There's nothing to say. You made your point. I'm a terrible sister who underestimated you. You're rich and powerful, and I'm an idiot. Congratulations. Her voice was laced with bitter sarcasm. I sat down in the chair across from her. You're not an idiot. I didn't recognize that my own sister was the investor keeping my company alive. That makes me pretty stupid. Or it makes me very good at staying anonymous. She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Why did you hide it? Why didn't you ever tell us what you actually do? Because I didn't want this, I said, gesturing vaguely between us. I didn't want family dynamics mixed up with business. I didn't want Dad asking for investment advice or Mom worrying about risk. Were you feeling competitive? Well, that worked out great. We sat in silence. Outside, a car drove past. Inside, a clock ticked somewhere in the house, its steady rhythm amplifying the quiet. I spent the last week trying to find replacement funding, Olivia said finally, her voice raspy. Nobody wants to touch us. The word is out that Crimson Capital is pulling out. Other investors think there's something wrong with the company. Our valuation is dropping. 2 major clients delayed signing contracts because they're worried about our stability. I know. I've been monitoring the situation. Of course you have. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Are you happy? Did this make you feel better? No, I admitted, the truth heavy on my tongue. It didn't. Then why did you do it? The question hung in the air between us, a weight that needed an answer. Why had I done it? Because I was angry. Because I was hurt. Because for one fleeting moment, I wanted Olivia to feel as small as she'd made me feel. Because you made me feel invisible, I said quietly, the words pulled from a deep, long-buried place. My whole life, you've been the successful one. The one who knew what she wanted and went after it. The one Mom and Dad were proud of. I've always been the quiet one in the background. The one nobody really noticed, Olivia. And I was okay with that. I genuinely didn't mind. I built something amazing without needing recognition from the family. But then you decided to tear me down publicly. You decided to make me look foolish and small and unsuccessful in front of everyone I care about, and I couldn't let that stand. Olivia's face crumpled, tears finally falling freely down her cheeks. I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought I was helping you by offering you a job as an administrative assistant. I thought you were struggling. Mom mentioned student loans, and I just assumed. She stopped, unable to finish the thought. I assumed wrong about everything. You did. I was condescending and mean, and I humiliated you. You're absolutely right to be angry. I looked at her, my sister, the person who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and held me when our grandmother passed away. All of that, before the competition and the comparison and the distance that had grown between us. I don't want to be angry anymore, I said, my voice softer now. But I also don't want to be disrespected. You won't be. I promise. I'll tell the whole family what really happened. I'll make sure everyone knows how successful you are. I don't care about that. I don't need them to know. But I need you to see me as an equal, not as your little sister who needs guidance. As someone who's built something real and valuable. I do, God. I do. You've built something incredible. She looked at me with something like awe, a genuine, unforced respect finally dawning in her eyes. $340 million. That's insane. It's what happens when you work quietly for a long time. And I almost ruined it by running my mouth. We sat there, two sisters who'd lost sight of each other somewhere along the way, now finding a new path back. What happens to next gen? Olivia asked finally, her voice small. Are you really going to liquidate your stake? I'd been thinking about this question all week. The business answer was clear. Pull out, let the company find new investors, move on. But the human answer was far more complicated, entwined with the deep, intricate threads of family. I'll give you a choice, I said, the words carefully weighed. Option 1. I sell my stake to new investors. They'll bring fresh capital, but they'll want control. You'll lose autonomy. Option 2. Crimson Capital maintains its position, but you bring in a professional COO to handle operations while you focus on product development. Someone with experience scaling companies. And you'll report quarterly directly to me. Option 2 means you'd still be involved. Yes. After everything I said, after how I treated you, we're sisters. That has to mean something. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, her voice choked. Why would you do that? Why would you help me after what I did? Because destroying your company doesn't actually make me feel better. It just makes me feel cruel. And I don't want to be cruel. I want to be successful and respected, yes, but not at the cost of becoming someone I don't recognize. This was a turning point, a conscious decision to choose compassion over raw vengeance, understanding that true power is not just about the ability to destroy, but the capacity to build and repair. Sarah, I don't deserve this. No, you probably don't. But I'm offering it anyway. She stood up and crossed the space between us, pulling me into a tight hug. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hugged her back, feeling years of distance and tension begin to ease, a quiet shift in the air between us. We'll need to rebuild trust. That's going to take time. I'll do whatever it takes. I mean it. Then prove it. Run your company well. Listen to advice and never, ever assume you know more about someone's life than they do. Deal. The restructuring took 6 weeks. Olivia hired Jessica Cho, a veteran COO from the software industry, to handle day-to-day operations. I sat in on the interview personally, asking pointed questions about scaling strategies and team management. Jessica was impressive, competent, sharp, and entirely unintimidated by Olivia's occasionally still-present ego. Perfect. NextGen's board meetings became a regular part of my schedule. I showed up in person once a month, reviewed financials, provided strategic input. Olivia deferred to my advice more often than I expected. She was learning, slowly, to see me as someone worth listening to. The family dinner that December was different. Mom, with a knowing glint in her eye, seated me next to Olivia, a deliberate choice. Dad made a toast before the meal. To family, he said, raising his glass, his gaze sweeping over all of us. To success in all its forms, and to learning that we don't always know as much as we think we do. He looked directly at Olivia when he said it, a gentle rebuke hidden beneath the warmth. She nodded, accepting it without protest. I want to say something, Olivia announced after the toast, her voice a little shaky but clear. The table quieted, everyone sensing the gravity of the moment. I owe everyone here, but especially Sarah, an apology. She took a deep breath. A few months ago, I said some incredibly disrespectful things about her career, things that came from my own ignorance and arrogance. She turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Sarah is one of the most successful people I know. She's built a venture capital firm that manages close to $1 billion. She's invested in dozens of companies that are changing industries, and she did it all quietly, without needing recognition or praise from anyone. The table was silent, everyone processing this astonishing information. She's also been the primary investor in my company for 2 years, which I was too self-absorbed to realize. And when I disrespected her, she had every right to walk away. The fact that she chose to stay involved, to help me succeed despite my behavior, says everything about her character. Mom was crying softly, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Dad looked proud and slightly stunned. So, I want to say publicly that I was wrong about everything, and I'm grateful to have a sister who's not only brilliant, but also more forgiving than I deserve. The table erupted in a mixture of applause and shocked exclamations. Cousin Chloe demanded to know more about venture capital. Uncle Robert wanted investment advice. Aunt Susan couldn't stop hugging me. I caught Olivia's eye across the table. She mouthed thank you, and I nodded back, a small smile finally gracing my lips. Later, after dinner, Michael pulled me aside. What you did for Olivia, giving her another chance. That took real character. I underestimated you too. I'm sorry. Apology accepted. I paused, then added with a mischievous glint, if you're ever looking for real estate investment opportunities, I'd love to pitch you some deals. He grinned, a genuine, unforced smile. Send the details to my office. We'll take a look. 6 months later. NextGen closed a major partnership with a Fortune 500 company. The deal put them on the map in a significant way, validating their potential. Olivia called me the moment the contracts were signed. We did it, she exclaimed, her voice jubilant, echoing with triumph. This is going to triple our user base. Congratulations. You've earned it. We've earned it, she corrected. Jessica and I couldn't have structured this deal without your input on the strategic framework. That's what investors do. No, that's what good investors do. You could have walked away and let me crash and burn. You chose differently. I looked out my apartment window at the glittering city skyline, a tapestry of ambition and dreams. You're my sister. That choice was always going to be different. There was a moment of silence on the line, then Olivia's voice, softer now, tinged with a deep, unexpected affection. I love you. You know that, right? I love you too. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and pulled up Crimson Capital's portfolio overview. 43 companies. 15 of them approaching billion-dollar valuations. Returns that exceeded industry standards by comfortable margins. My little online thing was changing the world, one calculated investment at a time, and nobody had to know my name for it to matter. I opened my email and started reviewing the next potential deal, a biotech startup working on revolutionary cancer treatments. The science looked promising. The team had experience. The financials needed work, but showed incredible potential. I made notes, asked questions, ran projections. By morning, I'd have a decision ready. That's what real business looked like. Not corner offices or expensive suits or public recognition. Just careful analysis, calculated risks, and the quiet patience to build something meaningful over time. Olivia had learned that lesson the hard way, but she had learned it. And somewhere in the process, we'd found our way back to each other. Not as the successful sister and the struggling sister, but as something new entirely. Do you ever wonder what lessons we truly learn only when us?